The Nike CEO just made an announcement that brought the entire sports world to a standstill. A 20-year-old from Manila just had her portrait mounted in the most storied corridor in all of sports. The same hallway where Michael Jordan's legacy echoes, where Ronaldo's image breathes on the walls, where the greatest athletes the world has ever produced are preserved in time on a stretch of wall that the vast majority of people on this planet will never lay eyes on in person. And in late February 2026, Alex Eala walked through it, flashed a wide smile, threw up a peace sign, and the internet completely unraveled. One post read, "History in full bloom." And that was not a fan writing from their bedroom. Those were the words Nike chose to display on the wall beside the portrait of a 20-year-old Filipino tennis player who, just 1 year earlier, most of the Western tennis world had barely registered. So, what exactly does the Nike CEO see in this young woman? What is it about Alex Eala that convinced one of the most powerful sports brands on the face of the earth that she belongs in the same hallway as Jordan, Ronaldo, and the greatest winners any sport has ever produced? The answer to that question stretches considerably further than tennis. It happened on February 27, 2026. Eala, freshly arrived in the United States ahead of the Indian Wells and Miami Opens, made a stop in Beaverton, Oregon. Not for a press conference. Not for a product launch. She simply walked into Nike World Headquarters, and what waited for her inside stopped her completely. Her portrait was displayed inside the legendary Ambassador Tunnel at Nike HQ, the same corridor that holds the faces of every Nike global ambassador across every sport on Earth, the same walls that have witnessed Michael Jordan and Ronaldo pass through on their way to becoming immortal. And right there among the legends stood a 20-year-old from Manila. Hands pressed over her face, tears moving down her cheeks. The image frozen from the Miami Open semifinal just 1 year before, a moment of pure and overwhelming disbelief that an entire nation had watched together and wept alongside in real time. Eala posed in front of it with a beaming smile and a peace sign. Nike framed the display with 3 words, "History in full bloom." That phrase moved across social media with the speed of something no one can stop. In the Philippines, it was trending within hours. Across the international tennis community, fans and former players paused mid-scroll because what Nike was communicating in that moment required no translation. They were not presenting Alex Eala as a promising young talent with potential still to be realized. They were presenting her as a global ambassador whose story was already permanently inscribed on the walls of the most celebrated sports institution on the planet. And if you believe that simply happens to any 20-year-old with a decent ranking, you have not been paying close enough attention. Nike also revealed customized displays featuring significant career milestones. They showcased her Sampaguita-inspired limited edition shirt, designed by Filipino artist Georgina Hamas. They presented custom Nike Air Rift split-toe sandals featuring a miniature tennis court and the national flower of the Philippines. They highlighted the personalized hair tie Nike gifted her at Wimbledon 2025, a piece crafted in the shape of a Sampaguita blossom and delivered in a box carrying a message written in Filipino, "Kung Magtanim, Anahin mo," meaning if you plant, you will harvest. Nike did not simply dress Alex Eala. They constructed a cultural monument around her. And that level of deliberate investment exists in an entirely different category from a standard endorsement arrangement. So, how did we arrive here? How does a girl from Manila end up enshrined in that tunnel? The story begins considerably earlier than most people realize. Think about what it demands of a person to pursue a dream when no one around them has ever done it before. Eala began training at 5 years old. Her grandfather served as her first coach. In interviews, she has spoken openly about those early mornings in Manila, the hours accumulated on court before school even began, the sacrifices that started before most children had even held a racket. She once reflected that looking back, the sacrifice had already taken root in those early years. A child putting in hours that adults would find demanding, chasing a vision that had no established blueprint anywhere in her country. She signed her first endorsement agreement at 8 years old with Globe Telecom, the Filipino telecommunications giant, not because she had won anything yet, but because someone looked at a child and saw inevitability already taking shape. She joined the Rafael Nadal Academy in Spain as a teenager and trained there for years, absorbing one of the most demanding and unforgiving tennis environments in the world, surrounded by future professionals, shaped by a philosophy built entirely on relentless effort and an absolute refusal to surrender. She became the first Filipino player to win a Grand Slam junior singles title, quietly filed that milestone away, and kept working. Then the story detonates. March 2025, the Miami Open. Alex Eala, ranked 140th in the world, arrives on a wild card invitation. Nobody outside the Philippines gives her a meaningful second glance. On paper, she is a filler entry in a draw packed with the finest players alive. Then she defeats Yelena Ostapenko, a Grand Slam champion. Then Madison Keys, another Grand Slam champion. Then Iga Swiatek, a 5-time Grand Slam champion and the #1 player on earth, in straight sets. The tennis world did not merely notice. It short-circuited entirely. She became the first wild card in history to eliminate 3 Grand Slam champions in straight sets at a single WTA event. The first Filipino woman to defeat a major champion in the Open era. The first Filipino player to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal. She entered the top 100 for the first time in her career. She would go on to claim her first WTA 125 title in Guadalajara. She competed at her first US Open and her first Wimbledon. She posted a career-high ranking of 31st entering March 2026. And through every tournament, every city, every country, the fans traveled with her. Packed stadiums. Overnight flights from Manila. A growing and devoted army of Filipino supporters generating noise in arenas that had never previously witnessed that quality of passion surrounding a women's tennis player. Goff noticed. Pagula noticed. Former professionals began appearing on podcasts describing Eala's star power as something that had already surpassed players ranked considerably above her in the standings. The tennis internet began asking a question that would have sounded genuinely absurd just 2 years earlier. Is Alex Eala already bigger than her ranking? The answer, as it turns out, is precisely the foundation upon which Nike constructed their entire strategy. Here is something the casual sports fan may not fully appreciate about Nike's recent history. The company endured one of the most painful stretches in its modern existence. Declining sales. A chief executive who had grown disconnected from the athlete. A brand that had, in the honest assessment of its own incoming leadership, lost its fundamental obsession with sport. The stock fell. The culture on campus deteriorated. The unmistakable electricity that had always defined Nike went quiet and stayed quiet. Then in October 2024, they brought back Elliott Hill, a 32-year Nike veteran who had retired in 2020. A man who began his career as an intern, cold-called his way into a position, and spent 3 decades developing an absolute and unshakable understanding of what makes Nike great. On his very first earnings call as CEO, Elliott Hill said something that reoriented everything. He declared that Nike would lead with sport and place the athlete at the center of every decision. He announced a return to the company's deepest roots. Athlete-first storytelling. Emotional connection. Sport as the foundation of every product, every campaign, every choice made at any level of the organization. He described athletes as Nike's creative fuel. Hill spent his first 60 days back meeting athletes exclusively, not executives, not investors, athletes. He sent messages to Sabrina Ionescu after games. He welcomed Ronaldo to campus. He was physically present at the WNBA summit. He paid a quarterback's fine for wearing mismatched cleats, purely to signal that Nike was itself again. Within that philosophy of leading with sport, leading with story, leading with the athlete, Alex Eala is not simply a suitable fit. She is a living blueprint for everything the philosophy demands. Hill told Fortune magazine that Nike sees an enormous opportunity in women's sports. He pointed directly to Caitlin Clark's cultural impact in basketball as evidence that a single athlete carrying the right story can move entire markets. He stated that Nike's ambition was to invite 8 billion consumers into the world of sport. And he returned repeatedly to the idea of athletes who inspire rather than merely perform, athletes whose journey generates an emotional resonance that no marketing budget on earth can manufacture. Alex Eala, at 20 years old, already possesses all of that. She has the journey. She has the underdog story built across years of grinding and obscurity. She has the cultural identity that connects directly to a nation of over 100 million people and extends beyond that to a global Filipino diaspora hungry to witness themselves represented at the highest levels of elite sport. She has the image, disciplined, humble, emotionally genuine in a way that cameras cannot fake. And she has the on-court results to make everything else credible. Nike did not stumble across Eala. They recognized her at 8 years old and have been building alongside her ever since. The Sampaguita hair tie at Wimbledon was not a marketing accessory. It was a declaration of cultural investment. The portrait in the tunnel is not a gesture of goodwill. It is a formal announcement. Now the broader business world is beginning to listen with full attention. Consider the financial dimension, because this is where the conversation becomes genuinely serious. In 2024, Nike signed Caitlin Clark to an 8-year deal reportedly worth $28 million, the largest endorsement agreement ever extended to a women's basketball player at that point in history. Sabrina Ionescu received her own signature shoe. Aya Wilson received her own signature line. Nike surveyed the explosion of women's sports and placed a calculated billion-dollar wager that a significant portion of the brand's future lives within women's athletes who can transcend their sport entirely. Now consider Alex Eala through that exact same lens. She is 20 years old, ranked 31st in the world and climbing. She has a fan base that fills stadiums in Auckland, Dubai, Manila, and Miami. She has a social media presence that connects to a country of over 100 million people and to the broader Asian market that Nike has explicitly identified as a strategic priority for the coming decade. Reports circulating within the tennis industry now suggest that major brands are actively pursuing her, with insiders comparing her commercial appeal